going to talk about business continuity and disaster recovery. It's a couple scenarios, incidents that I went through with my company and kind of how we handled them, what we learned from them, some things we made better. I feel that every time, something happens, you continue to get better. You'll never be perfect, but as long as you learn from what happened, that's progress, right? So my name's Eric Kubla. I'm an IT server manager for 15 years for a regional bank based out of central Pennsylvania. We range from just outside of Philly to Cincinnati with about 130 branches. 10 plus years as a Pittsburgh VMUG leader, 2023 and 24 USC regional champ for VMUG, and 9 years as a VM expert. And I guess I'm considered a VMUG community speaker. I've spoke at, this is my first VMworld / Explorer presenting, but I've spoke at 14 VMUG user cons over the last 2 years. So at the end, please take your surveys for any sessions that you went to, help them out with the content. So this isn't a Veeam presentation, just to be clear. It's just what I use and what I like, so that's why I mention it. But so why did we start using Veeam, and why did we change our DR situation, right? So in 2014, we went through a pretty large core conversion, replacing a lot of core banking applications. Anybody work for banks in the crowd? Okay. Familiar with Jack Henry? Okay. So that's what we went to back in 2014. A lot of our stuff was homegrown, in-house, not all of it, but some. So, and in the process of that conversion, we were changing, we were in the midst of virtualizing a lot of things, which were now 100% virtual for servers. So we're going from physical servers to virtual, and replacing a lot of older apps with the newer ones. And during this conversion, we found, okay, so we need a DR scenario, right? We need something for DR. Previously with physical servers, you had physical here, physical there. You had a patch here and you had a patch there. If you upgrade the OS, you're doing everything twice, right? You could use WAN sync for some stuff. We did for some databases and web servers, but for patching and application upgrades, it was a pain. So for our DR scenario, we chose Veeam at the time. It's because I was somewhat familiar with it. I had played around with it a little bit, and that's what we chose to go with at the time, just to use their replication feature, right? We didn't do backups with Veeam until just recently. So it solved our current need for a DR scenario. Do we have Veeam users in here? Okay. So then some of you are familiar with how it works. You set up the replication job, set a schedule, it runs, it's great. You can do a planned failover, you bring your VM up in DR, and it works. There's some things you can tweak in the job to set IPs and change the networks. But so it helped us alleviate that DR issue that we had when going virtual. And now all of our servers are in Veeam, and we're, like I mentioned, we're 100% virtual. So what happened? So in March of 2022, we got a call on a Friday morning that we were going to lose power in our data center. Not the kind of call you want to get at 8:30 on a Friday, but there was an issue where power was on the UPS to switch over, but something didn't work, and the power got stuck on the UPS. Couldn't go back to house power, couldn't go to the generator. So we had basically 20 minutes. I don't know that we actually got 20, but nonetheless, that's what we had. So I called my team, which consists of me and at the time 4 other team members, and I said, listen, we need to start shutting down Exchange and SQL servers as fast as you can, because I knew in 10 minutes we're probably not going to get everything failed over. So for the sake of trying to avoid any data corruption on databases, I just thought we'll shut them down and we'll bring them up. And we did get a few servers failed over, just going through Veeam and hitting the plan failover. It came up. And what we didn't, we slowly brought up based on process and priority, but we also dealt with an iSeries. iSeries users? Good for you. So my team doesn't manage the iSeries. It's a separate team, but our company's small enough where everybody knows who does what. We all work together no matter what. So we had a little time, because if you know anything about an iSeries, there is a failover process. It's not within Veeam, and it takes some time, right? It's not as quick. So it buys us a little time while that happens to get all the applications up, all the applications working. And even though our Veeam server was down, they were still replicated to DR. And it was kind of a good thing, happening at 8:30 in the morning, because as a bank, we didn't open till 9 a.m. And we had got all our nightly processing completed. We were good. It was just a matter of getting things up and being able to, serve our clients on Friday. And we were able to do that. We didn't close our doors. We were able to get things up and get things working in time. But now we're running completely out of our DR site, which we've never done. And I'll get to that and some lessons learned in testing your plan and how it worked. So a couple things we learned on what we could improve. One of them that we put in place about a year before this happened was Cisco OTV. Is anybody familiar with that? Okay. So it allows you to stretch layer 2 networking from one data center to the other. So I briefly mentioned earlier, Veeam lets you configure a lot of stuff, IP and networks. So it does that for you, right? You're running a network here and a network there. You can do that within Veeam. But when you're taking a server from one place to the other and changing the IP, I think every time we did a DR test with that scenario, we had a firewall issue. Then it takes a half hour to fight with the network team to figure out, to prove it's a network issue and get it fixed. But with OTV, you don't have that issue. It just replicates the IP, no DNS changes, everything works. So, that was a project the network team had been working on for some time to get approved and get in place. And, it brought a ton of value. And especially in a scenario like this, it made everybody's job easier, because that's one less thing we had to worry about when dealing with production systems being down. The other thing that we got out of it was Veeam CDP. We upgraded to Enterprise Plus, and we got CDP, which is continuous data protection. So prior to this, we were replicating, but we were only replicating a few times a day. Most of them just once a day, some a couple times. But the problem with that is, if your replication job runs at 10 p.m. or midnight and your outage happens at 8:30 in the morning, fortunately we're closed. You don't have a lot of stuff happening in those hours. But that data, and it's not lost because, right, it's there on a powered off VM. It's just not available for you at that time. So with CDP, it allows you to, drastically decrease that RPO. You can get extremely low with it. In some cases, depending on the speed of the transfer and the size of the data you're transferring, you could get as low to under a minute. I think they say 15 seconds. I mean, I think most people would be happy with a minute, right? We have some applications, database servers, that we can't quite get that low, but we're still under 10 minutes. And this was brought up by our DBA, because we had many calls after this, right? What can we do better? What happened? What are some issues we need to address? And this is one that brought up, and he said, this is great that it happened at 8:30, because nightly processing had only finished a few hours ago. Had this happened at 4:30, it would have been a lot of work for them to run all that processing again to get that data, right? So CDP eliminated that possible issue for them and us, right? Now we're, 5 minutes at most, 7 minutes, to where we can just pick a point in time and put that database right there, and makes everybody feel, hopefully we never have to use that, right? But if we do, people feel more comfortable knowing that that's one less thing we have to worry about. So this really isn't a lesson learned, because we were doing it from the beginning. So after 2014, the next year, we started annual DR tests. And not that we didn't do any DR tests before, but these were much more involved by much more groups. And my boss at the time said, we're going to have a lot of downtime because it does not take long to fill over servers in Veeam. It takes long to fill over the iSeries, and it takes long for users to test. So we spend 20 minutes failing it over, make sure configuration is accurate and correct. And then we sit there for 4 hours where everybody tests. Then we take 20 minutes to fill it back and sit there for 4 hours where everybody tests and help out if there's any issues. Excuse me. So during that time, he's like, document the process. Let's make this as easy on us as possible for the next time, not thinking the next outage, just the next test. And so that the next time, you can do my job. I can hand anybody my process and they're able to do it, right? That's the whole idea, that a new guy on the team, which I got 2 new guys this year, they should be able to do our DR test just based off of the documentation. And it just doesn't go for IT, right? That should be across the board for all business units. That, obviously it's up to them to do that, but the more it's documented and the more it's tested and planned, the easier this will be. We never tested a full data center outage. Has anybody ever tested a full data center complete? You have? Good for you. That's awesome. We never did it until this. So I consider this a test, right? And being that we never did it, and I would think that upper management and some C-level people would agree with me that we would probably give ourselves a solid 7 out of 10 on it, especially for never doing it before. For the response time, how little downtime there was, the lack of impact to customers. I think people were, all things considered, very happy with the outcome. And I attribute a lot of that to us documenting everything, having a plan, and testing it. So when we do our DR tests, it's not just the server team failing over, saying, "Oh, the server's up." We have the business units that get in there and test. Every year we do a full core DR test where we fill over the iSeries and every application that is related to that. So it's a full core application DR test that takes months of planning to make sure everything's right, everything's ready, timing, who's involved. And we do that every year, and every year it gets better. But every year we find something we need to improve on, which is why we test every year. So when a situation like this happens, most people are ready and somewhat comfortable with it, right? And having a plan and testing it on a regular basis really, not to say people weren't freaking out when this happened, right? But that's the other thing. Just stay as calm as possible and let them freak out. Hopefully you have a good business continuity team that manages that and keeps people away from you and lets you do your job, and the iSeries team do their job, and the network team and the database team, and let them complain to a VP and let them facilitate the questions and answers. But so prod versus DR. At the time, we had a production and a DR location. We kind of rebranded them to primary and secondary. We realized that our production data center may not be, it was good, don't get me wrong, it's good, but maybe our DR location's better. Does it have better power? Does it have better generators? So we then referred to them as primary and secondary with the idea that we're going to move workloads from here to here. And you're not doing that overnight unless you have an outage. But we didn't keep them there. That weekend that it happened, so we got it fixed, and we got everything back from our DR to our production location by Sunday morning. So over the weekend, we were back. Everything was back where it was Friday at 8:30 a.m. But then we're like, okay, let's think about this. Should we run out of DR? Should we make that our secondary? So the answer was yes. So we started, every time we did a DR test, it stayed there. So in August or whenever it is that we do our core DR test, we left the iSeries and all the applications that work for it. We left it there. Then as we did more DR tests, we left them there. So we're really not prod and DR anymore, right? We're primary and secondary. And we would just have to go into Veeam, change our jobs. It's as easy as they are to set up, just delete it, create a new one, right? So we have jobs going this way, jobs going that way. What's important with that is to document that. know what production servers are in which location. We don't have a lot of applications that support, HA in 2 locations. We do have some. And to back up, we do run domain controllers, DHCP, DNS in both locations. So that wasn't an issue. But as I mentioned, where do your apps run? Know what apps are running in what data center. If you do, run production and applications in 2 locations. And can both sites support a full workload? So that was a question when we started going virtual, and we went with Cisco UCS. And the idea at the time was, you go apples to apples. We want to be able to run production in a scenario that happened to us. We want to know that it's going to work here. So if you get 8 hosts here, you put 8 here. If you're going to get 20 terabytes of storage here, you get 20 terabytes there. Leave no doubt that, whatever's here is going to work there, at least, resource-wise. And can you live without something? I'm sure there's some test systems, maybe even some production servers that aren't very important, but I know a few of our business units use our UAT, our test systems, as their daily job to QA new versions of software we're putting out. So while it's not client impacting necessarily, there are people that use UAT systems. So while they can be down for a day or two in an outage in a DR scenario, you can't say that, oh, our data center might be down for 2 months. We're just not going to use those UAT VMs, because chances are in 2 months we're doing an application upgrade. We're going to need those. Because everything we do, we upgrade in a UAT environment, test it before we do prod. And I hope most of you do that as well. So business continuity. Before this happened, I knew we had a business continuity team. I knew they were there. I knew who represented our group on that team. But the most I knew about it was a spreadsheet I'd get once a year, and it would list all the applications. This was all documented. But it would also have a number next to it on importance. And every number was like a 1, right? So it didn't matter, because they would ask the application owner, how important is your application? And to them, it is a 1, right? And I get that. It makes sense, right? That's how they feel. But knowing who's on the team and who manages the team, I think we got a little bit more visibility with this. We had a lot of calls after this to reevaluate what applications are a priority and to understand the expectations from other departments. And while doing that, we also had a chance to educate them and understanding their expectations and explaining the reality of that. Yes, we know how important your application is, but understand that we need this application up so that our branches can help clients when they walk through the door, so that when they go onto online banking, that their account information is accurate. We know people are calling in and needing support, but client first, and then what impacts the client, that's first and foremost. But in order to do that, in order for you to even log on, right, you need a domain controller. To communicate internally, you need Exchange. And explaining all that to them and it took a scenario like this, I think, to really, for that understanding to go across the organization as a whole. Not that they didn't get it from DR tests, but again, we never did a full DR test. So all they know is, the DR test starts at 6 o'clock. IT does their stuff. We log on at 6:30 and we could start testing without a real understanding of what IT was doing in the background. They just know we make things work. We make things work. We keep it up for them. They don't necessarily know how, and they really don't need to know how, but they need to understand that there are pieces that need to be in place in order for that to happen. So with that, I'm about done. We've got a few minutes if anybody has any questions.
For the Active Directory stuff, do you have to do anything like seizing the roles or anything? Or
No, just having them, yeah. For the most part, yes. With OTV, it allows us to maintain the same IPs because, so the replica is not powered on. So when you do a planned failover in Veeam, it powers down the production, or the one that's on. It powers that down before it powers on the other one. So yeah, they can have the same IP with OTV. I don't believe so. And I don't manage our network, but we do have identical networking equipment in both locations. So like I said, with our core infrastructure of UCS, which is now UCSX, it's 1-to-1. Our core networking is also 1-to-1. It's identical what's here as what's there, whether it's firewall or level 2 or layer 2, layer 3 switching. We keep things as identical as possible.
What's the advantage of replicating AD? I mean, you can have AD running on both sides.
We do have it on both sides.
So you didn't fail over AD?
No. We do have it running in both locations.
For your application?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Did you use any VRA or blueprints for your application deployment? Since you have brought like multiple environments in your team, do you use automation at all, VRA automation?
No, so the question was about automation. No, we don't automate any of it. That's something that we are going to look into as we use as we use Veeam more and more. Like I mentioned, we just got done migrating all of our backups to Veeam. So orchestrating things within Veeam anyhow is something we want to look into. And also, we also use Pure for our storage. And talking with our Pure reps, we are going to look into how Pure and Veeam work well together to leverage snapshots and do backups from that to make it even more efficient.
What was the I-series that you were talking about?
So the question, what was the I-series that I was talking about? The I-series is a mainframe. So yeah, it's replicated. It uses its own software. It's an IBM product. And they have their own proprietary replication software that works, right? The process to do that failover is a little longer than a virtual server. All right. If there's nothing else, and if there is anything else, I'll be out here. Feel free to come up and then talk. And here's my information. The blog I just started not too long ago. I have one on there kind of related to this, and I hope to continue that and keep updating with how I use Veeam and just any. Oh, a real quick question while I have a minute. I'm just curious. Anybody use CrowdStrike? Anybody impacted by CrowdStrike? You might not use it, but I'm sure you might have been impacted, right? Yeah, so that's unfortunate. So that's a DR scenario that, or more of a business continuity scenario that was completely not your fault, right? But you still have to have a plan. And that's where, no matter what, you got to take into consideration all types of scenarios for outages. Might not be your fault at all, right? But who has to fix it? You do, right? They're not going to come fix it for you. So, considering all things when you're talking about, don't just consider a power outage or, considering having half your environment go blue screen because of a bad file. But no, all things considered, I still like CrowdStrike. I'm happy we have them. I think the product is super easy to use. But yeah, that was an unfortunate DR, business continuity. I've heard some people refer to it as a security incident. Call it what you will. It's another scenario where you need to have a good plan when something goes wrong. All right, thank you.